How do you get full and fair compensation for your wrongful death case? As a wrongful death lawyer, I often have to advise my clients on the best way that we can build the evidence to make sure that they get fair compensation for their case. Unfortunately, they've just undergone the death of a loved one. They're going through one of the most painful experiences of their life, and a lot of times they don't want to have to deal with the issues involved in building the evidence of the case. But there are certain factors that are just so critical to getting the full value of a case that I wanted to put this video out there so that anybody going through a wrongful death case can really understand why it's important to work with your attorney in order to get the full value of your case. The first thing to understand is that the evidence of your damages in the case begins accumulating the moment that you find out about the loss. In other words, as soon as you find out that your loved one was injured or has died, the evidence starts to accumulate. So, for example, what happens immediately when you find out about your loved one dying, that is going to be a story that is going to most likely be told to the jury later on. Fast forwarding a little bit, when you have to tell your loved ones and other people about what happened, that is a factor. Those are stories that are going to go towards the pain and suffering that you've endured. And then probably one of the most powerful pieces of evidence that we have given in wrongful death cases is when the funeral services or the memorial services are videotaped or photographed. So it's very important that if there is a memorial service, that service is videotaped and photographed, because that sometimes becomes some of the most powerful evidence of the case. And so even though it's the last thing you want to think about when you've lost your loved one, it's important because later on you're going to be glad you did, because those are factors that are very, very relevant in the ultimate determination of the value. So what other factors go into making sure you get full compensation for the case? Your willingness as the survivors of the estate, it's very important that you choose a personal representative who acts as the fiduciary for the survivors. In other words, the personal representative has to act in the best interest of the survivors of the estate. Now, sometimes we've had the family members themselves have gotten together and they chose one particular family member to act as the personal representative of the estate. And then other times they've gotten together and they've decided we want to have an independent personal representative who will make the decisions on behalf of the estate. I believe the wisest thing to do is to have an independent personal representative for most cases, because that personal representative is being an independent party. A lot of times a lawyer, maybe a former judge is what we've used in the past, can look at the case objectively, more objectively than a family member, and can determine what would be the fair settlement value of the case without leaving money on the table, without giving the case away for less than the full value, but also without overreaching in terms of taking the risk of going to trial if it's not advisable, if the settlement offer on the table is something that they should take as opposed to going to trial. But it's the willingness of the personal representative of the estate to prepare the case for trial, and the survivors to prepare the case for trial, and to go to trial if they don't get the full and fair settlement offer. That is another major factor in determining the value of the case. I've had clients, unfortunately, they've lost a loved one and their case was very valuable, but they decided that they did not want to go through the court process. They did not want to run the risk of going to a jury trial. They have settled for less than the full value of the case against my own advice. I don't advise that. I advise that you listen to the professionals that you have hired, and you hire a independent personal representative that you can communicate to, that has no stake in the game, that literally has no stake in the game, that can give you objective advice on whether or not the case should settle at the settlement offer that's on the table. Okay, what is another major factor? huge factor in determining the value of a wrongful death case is your ability as the survivor and the witnesses who know you's ability to tell the story of what you've been through. In other words, a wrongful death case is won and lost by the stories that we tell to the jury. And there we're talking about true stories. These are not fictional stories, they're true stories. And so stories about the deceased person's life that illustrate how much he or she meant to you. Stories about your dreams and hopes and dreams for the deceased person and how the deceased person was going to fit into you realizing those hopes and dreams. Stories about your relationship of struggles and overcoming challenges and the love that you have that illustrates the kind of relationship you had with the deceased, because your mental, as a survivor of the deceased in a wrongful death case, under most circumstances, if you're the child of the deceased or a parent of the deceased sometimes, or the spouse of the deceased all the time, then your relationship with them and your mental and emotional pain and suffering is a huge factor. And the way that a jury connects with you and understands your pain and suffering is through short stories. And so one of the ways that I really encourage my clients to help them get the full value of their case is to keep a journal. Okay? Keep a journal that is intended to act as a memory aid later, so you can really understand later on, looking back, what the struggles that you went through early on after the death of your loved one. And then continue keeping that journal to see how those struggles have evolved and how your mentality has evolved over time. And one of the best ways to keep that journal is what I like to do with my wrongful death clients is I give them a certain number, a specific phone number that they can text their journal entries to. In other words, instead of writing it out in an actual journal, whenever they're sitting down and they think about their loved one and they have some thoughts about their loved one, they can text it to me, and that gives me a much better idea of what my client is going through in real time. So if they're sitting there and they feel compelled to write a journal entry, I can read what they're feeling in real time, and then I've got that documented in my file, which gives me the stronger ability to be able to tell my client's story, which gives me the better opportunity to make sure that they get full and fair recovery in the case. Whether it be a jury that I'm telling the story to or an insurance adjuster, I want to make sure that whoever I am trying to convince to give a full and fair settlement value, that person can understand the humanness of what's happened here and the real emotional loss that my client has suffered, and the journal entries are the best possible way. I like to do it through the texting message because it can be done in real time, but also any text messages that you send me as your attorney, those are automatically saved in my file, in the file, and they are also 100% completely confidential. In other words, they are privileged material that the defense will never be able to see unless we want them to see it. Okay? That's the beauty of privileged material, is it's completely confidential. The defense can't get a hold of any communications between you and me unless we decide to give them those communications. So that's very, very helpful in helping improve, or not improve, but to show the full value of your wrongful death case. There's so many other factors in the valuation of a wrongful death case. One of the other biggest factors is my job, which is proving the full extent of the defendant's liability. In other words, proving that the defendant was a bad actor, that they were wrong, that they broke rules, that they violated as many possible rules as many rules as they violated. I need to bring that out. I'm talking about statutory rules, federal motor carrier safety regulations. I'm talking about building code violations, other types of rules, and I can show how they broke those rules. And it was by breaking those rules. When they broke the rules, they knew that the rules existed. They knew that they existed for the safety of other people. people, but they broke the rule anyway. If I can show that, that really helps improve the chances of us getting a full and fair settlement for the case. So those are some of the factors. I've also written a blog that you can look at regarding how to maximize the value of a wrongful death case. My name is Jimmy Fasig. It's also very important to understand that it is that the valuation of a wrongful death case requires the skill of an experienced wrongful death attorney. I am Jimmy Fasig. I am an experienced wrongful death attorney. You are more than welcome to give me a call. My number is 850-777-7777. That's 850-777-7777. I'm happy to talk with you about the value of your case. Thank you so much.